Welcome to Nucleona Studios. My name is Andrew, and today we're getting started in View xStream 10. Now in today's tutorial we are starting with View's Personal Learning Edition, and you can get a copy of the Personal Learning Edition for free on View's website, and it's available for non-profit personal use. This means that you can't be using the software for anything where you make any money. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. I will let you know in advance that these tutorials will be approximately 30 minutes long, sometimes a little longer. And in today's tutorial we're going to cover the overview, the basic editors, and the basic functions within View, so that you can be right away able to use View like a professional. So up here you're going to find your file menu, like in any other application. And in your file menu you're going to find the New option. Let's go ahead and click on New and just go into the Physical and click on Default. And don't actually select OK just yet. I want to actually show you View's Collections section. In the View Collections, it's like a library where you're able to actually save and store different presets that you've created or access View's already existing presets. Now, View's already existing presets are more of a reference. They're there for you to get you started. But View is one of the most, if not the most, powerful piece of software in existence when it comes to world design. And one of the great features in View is unlimited customization. And therefore, though all these presets are great presets, there are millions more that you can create once you start getting used to View and used to View's different material editors and atmosphere editors and different features within View. And so that's when this collection section becomes very useful. When you create a new scene and you like, say for example, an atmosphere that you've created, you want to save that atmosphere so that you can use it again in later scenes. So let's go ahead and give you an example of how you would do this. If I go into Atmospheres here, and I create a new folder, and I'm going to name it Nucleonis Atmospheres. You can name it whatever you like. And then I'm just going to name this Sunset Mountain. View makes a quick little render, and then if I go into New, which when you click New, it just loads a blank scene with a new atmosphere. That's why you're seeing it ask you for an atmosphere for your scene. I'll click on this page here, and that lets me add a new collection. And I'm going to scroll up to Atmospheres, and right here you'll see Nucleonis Atmospheres that I just created that folder. When I add it, there's Sunset Mountain, and I can go ahead and open that. And there is a blank scene, but it has the atmosphere that I've just created. And this load dialog is universal across all portions of View. Whenever you're loading something into View, whether it's an atmosphere, whether it's a plant, or a rock, or an object, whether it's a material, you're going to see this load dialog. And in all of these load dialogs, you're able to actually access all of your presets through the folders you've had them in. I'm sorry, I just have to clear those. So it's a great little feature, great little function, and we're going to familiarize ourselves with that a little more later. For now, let's get started with getting familiar with the different toolbars and sections of View. So here you have your top toolbar, which allows you to access all the manipulation tools for your scene, things like render, which you can also access by pressing F9. And before I go any further, I want to get you familiar with two things. First, you'll see this little dot here in the bottom of each of these buttons. Not all the buttons have them. And then over here, you're going to see a little arrow. That means that this button contains more than just one button. It has multiple settings. If it's just a square, it only has two settings. Those settings are able to be accessed by either right-clicking or left-clicking. And if you highlight your mouse over it, you'll see that right-clicking renders and left-click brings up render options. On this one, however, there are no tooltips that come up. And the reason for that is because you have to press and hold. There's more options, and it's just not practical to put it in a tooltip. So left click and hold on anything with an arrow will allow you to access an entire menu. And in that menu, you'll see all the different sections, the different options that you have. Here, for example, we have water, ground plane, and cloud layer. Or in this section, we have a sphere, a cylinder, a cube, a pyramid, a cone, a torus, and a plane, and of course an alpha plane. So that's a good little thing to know. Up here you can look through all these different buttons and maybe try them out and see if you can figure out exactly what they do. I'm going to show you now the paint ecosystem. This paint ecosystem we're going to get to a little bit later in this tutorial. This is what I consider an editor because it allows you to edit the ecosystem within your scene. Alright, and you can access that from your top toolbar. This guy here will allow you, if you left click, to bring up the atmosphere editor, which we will be covering in the scene a little bit. And if you left click, it'll let you just load an atmosphere. This is not the same as clicking new. When you click new, it deletes the scene or gives you a new scene. It doesn't delete it if you've saved it, but it gives you a brand new scene and it lets you select an atmosphere for the scene. This one just changes the atmosphere within your already existing scene. And of course you have your save, your undo tools, your cut, copy, and paste tools, and your open and your new tools. Along here you'll find all your creation tools. This is where you'll find anything that you are going to add to your scene. Things like water, things like objects, text, terrains, plants, rocks. You generally, for the most part, won't use the plants, rocks, and cloud layers from here. Or you might use the clouds from here, but you won't use the plants and rocks. Generally, for the most part, you'll either use an ecosystem painter and select a single instance, or you use the painter within the material editor, which I'll show you also later. So here is all your creation tools. The next thing we're going to focus on is your overview. Not the overview, the viewports. You've got your main, side, top, and front viewports. And any of those viewports, once you click inside them, you can access a special menu. So if I create a sphere, you'll notice that a little menu shows up. We're not going to cover PL, G, and V right now. We will, however, cover the move, rotate, and scale tools. So if I were to go into this is my top view, and in my top view, if I were to select the move tool and click here in the middle, I can move this around on either the X or the Y axes. If I select this, it's basically a universal move but on a lateral axis. And if I select this scale tool, I can increase or decrease the size of the object universally. And of course, if I select the rotate tool and I select inside, I can then universally rotate my object. Then for more precision rotation, you see this green line here that'll allow me to that green line here will allow me to rotate along the y-axis, and if I select this yellow tool here, it'll allow me to rotate along the x-axis. Or actually it's blue, and that would be the z-axis. And then the red, of course, will allow me to rotate along the x-axis. And then in the scale, of course, same options. You can scale on the x-axis, you can scale on the y-axis. And if you do manage to select the blue, you can actually scale on the z-axis as well in other views. And of course the same goes from the move. You can move along the y, or the x, the y, and the z-axis within each section. And very useful, of course. Yeah, so let's just continue from there. So that's that. Now, if you want to make any of these views full size so you can get a little bit better of a look at what you're working with, just double click on the top of the toolbar. In each one of these viewports, you're going to see that there is a little cube up top of the drop down arrow, and that allows you to modify different options for that particular view. You can adjust the what view it is. You can adjust the quality of the view, and what also is displayed within that view, whether light is displayed, whether you're seeing fog in the view. In these three views, the side, top, and front view, I like to keep them all on wireframe, and that's why you'll notice that all of my objects look a little bit different than probably yours do, and of course that's because I don't have them flat shaded. I do have them actually on wireframe. That just allows my computer to have a little more performance. Alright, so next thing we're going to cover is manipulating the camera in your viewports. This is probably the most important thing I'm going to teach you today, because most people get confused, especially when coming from other pieces of software such as Maya or Blender, especially coming from Blender, as Blender has its own tools as well. So, very most important thing to remember when manipulating the camera is the 4 right-click rule. Again, the 4 right-click rule. And that rule is, there are 4 right-click options to manipulate your camera. And there is one option, and that's the dolly option, that uses your mouse wheel. That's everything you need to know about right-clicking, or about manipulating your camera. The first right-click option is right-click and drag. Right-click and drag will move your head around, or the camera, as if it was on your shoulder. Alright. The second right-click option is Alt right-click and hold, and that'll actually rotate you around the selected object. The third right-click option is Control right-click and hold, and that'll actually change the focal length of the camera. And if ever you want to set your focal length specifically, click on the camera in the overview, and come up to the focal length and change it. And the fourth right-click option is Shift right-click, and that'll allow you to pan left and right. Now, due to the sheer size of my screen, it is very fast, because right now I'm working with a very small object. Once you start working with larger objects, you'll find that things move a lot more smoothly. The larger your scene is, the slower the object will move. Alright, you notice that my pan now is much more efficient. Scenes should be quite large in view. It starts you out in the very center of the scene, so when you create a new sphere, the sphere is small, and it makes the pan seem like it's not functioning. But that's just because your scene is not large enough. You need to actually zoom out and make your scene larger. View starts you in small, just as a default. But you don't want to stay that way, otherwise you'll have a very difficult time working with the pen features in the camera manipulation tools. Alright, the next thing we're going to go and focus on is your overview. And this is just a quick little guide that we'll cover. In the overview, you have the ability to, we're not going to cover layer today. I'll cover that when I do a tutorial on the overview. But you do have the ability to hide anything that you've selected. Except for cameras. I've never actually even tried to hide camera before. If you double click on the camera, it'll give you the ability to access the advanced camera options. We're not going to cover that today. So if I hide the sunlight, it'll actually turn the light off from my scene. And that'll actually make the scene dark. Right? And when I create a new object, you'll see that in the scene. When you see this plus arrow, that means it's grouped. I'm assuming most would realize that, but we'll just cover that anyway. And each of these objects in here have different options when you right-click on them. Some of them allow you to change materials and edit materials. Some allow you to edit the object, which you'll see right here. An example of that would be water. If I click on Edit Object, or just double-click on the sea, it'll bring up the water surface options. These are the very basic options for water. These are just beginner level options. And you can control and manipulate the water. In the future, I will give a nice tutorial on how to create realistic ocean and waves with animation. and that won't be using that edit object function that you find by double clicking on the C or right click edit object. Okay, so that's basically the overview. I mean, there's not very much to look at. The overview is kind of self-explanatory. Here's your main camera, and in your main camera you're going to find, sorry, not your main camera, this is your preview. And in your preview, you have the ability to switch from your different cameras, main camera, top. I do believe you can access other cameras, but I'm not going to get into that right now. So when you have a scene, let's just go ahead and create a brand new scene, and this is where we're going to start actually working on a scene today. When you have a scene and you double click, it'll auto refresh if you double click on this on the preview. However, it'll also auto update if you have auto update selected. I keep that not selected because it'll auto update every time you change your scene, which is good if you have a very powerful computer. However, if you're working with a middle of the line or mediocre computer and you have auto update and you're working in a complex scene, every time that updates, it's going to slow down your ability to work quickly. And that's why View has given us the ability to turn off auto update and update as we please by double clicking on the preview. And one more thing we are going to cover before we get into creating our scene is this top editor, where you'll find all your attributes for your different selected objects. So when you select, say for example, ground, this material here will change the ground, and I can go in and change the color on it, and now the ground is going to be brown, right? And over here you also find positional tools or orientation tools for the selected object, and here's animation tools for the selected object. We're not going to worry about animation right now, and position we're not really going to cover, but you'll notice each of these have buttons, and they allow you to adjust things like your rotation, your scale, your twist or your skew, and your pivot position. Pivot position is very paramount when you're doing animations. And then actually the object itself's position. And depending on what you have selected, depends on what will show up here in the main attributes, or as View calls it, the aspect. Say for example I add a cloud layer. I'm just going to go with basic low clouds. I add a cloud layer. Let's get rid of this sphere really quickly. Alright, so I've added this cloud layer. You'll notice here up in the aspect or in the attributes that there are no material editing options, and that's because the cloud doesn't actually, you don't edit the cloud like that. You edit the cloud through the atmosphere editor. Clouds are generally one color. The sun and the ambient lighting will modify the color of the cloud, and View has done a very good job, Eon has done a very good job of making sure that View corresponds with real scenery, so that you're not so that when you create a scene it reacts as if it were as it would in real life, in nature. So that's a good little tidbit of information about View, about Eon View. So we're going to go ahead and create a scene now with the basic information that I've given you, and let's create a sunset. I like sunsets. Besides, I named this atmosphere sunset mountain, so I figure we should have a sunset and a mountain. Fair enough, right? So go ahead and click the water tool, and you can double click and make some changes to the options if you'd like. I'm just going to bring the calmness down to 16% right there. And I'm actually going to double click on the material editor right here. By double clicking on this, it opens up the advanced material editor, and I'm going to select default water, and I'm going to go into the overall color, and I'm going to give it a bit of an Amazonian color. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go like that. Yeah, like that. Okay. And just take a quick render. Good. Now I'm going to click and hold and create a ground plane. I'm just going to drop that ground plane down. Something I actually should show you right now. When you first open up View, you'll notice that the camera, if you have a piece of geometry, your camera will ride on that geometry. Literally, it will ride on that geometry if you move it left and right. If I come into this scene here, and I scroll out, and I scroll in, sorry. Alright, it's not doing it right now, which is good. But you'll notice that if I go into the side view perspective, that the camera is riding up my mountain. It's not actually, I'm telling it to go left, but it's going up the mountain. And this might confuse many new users because they won't know, well, what the heck is going on? And the way to fix this is this little guy here that locks the height. What that actually is doing is making sure that you're not occluding the camera within an object, and generally for the most part. So deselect that. That'll give you the freedom to actually go through the objects. Not that you would do that in real life, but it gives you a little more freedom. And if you don't want that to happen, say for example when you're working in animation, you can just turn that back on, and that will lock the camera back into an object-oriented non-occlusion phase, as I like to call it. Alright, so we've got our infinite plane, and we've got our sea, or our ground and our sea, and I'm actually just going to put some sand in the ground. So if you double-click here, you can load presets that are already in View. And today I'm not going to go into creating materials. We're going to do that in a later tutorial. So I'm just going to use one of the default tutorials within View. And we're going to go into landscapes here, and if you scroll down to the bottom, there's this lovely little guy called Soft Dunes. And that actually makes for pretty good looking sand. You'll notice that when I did that, the watercolor completely changed. And the reason for that, of course, is because, again, like I said, View works with your scene as if it would, as we would see something in nature. So in nature, when you have water and there's no ground underneath the water for a couple hundred meters, the water looks very dark. And the reason for that, of course, is because there's no refraction of the light to actually show us the color of the light. It's just darkness. The light can't actually refract back up because there's nothing at the bottom to give the light any ambience. And the same thing happens in View. If you don't have a plane underneath your water, there's no ambience, and therefore the further down, of course, I put this plane, the darker the water is going to become because there's no ambient light reflecting in the water. And if I put it right up to the surface, that water is going to be practically green. And I'm very high up right now. Let's bring the camera down to like 5 meters. And you can actually get a really good look. Let's increase the agitation on the water. And now you can see the color a little bit better. I'm going to tilt the camera. Let's even throw in a mountain. I'm just going to go with a basic mountain, not going to make any changes yet. And as you'll see now, that water is very shallow. Now I'm going to drop that plane down. And bring it up just a smidge. And just like that, you can see the color of that water. It looks like we're in the Caribbean now. Now, this feature in View, the making something look like it would in nature, it's not really a feature. It's a collection of thousands of features that they've implemented within the product, within the program. This feature is extremely, extremely important because if you'll notice, Because the depth of the water changes the color of my scene, you'll notice that when the water is shallow, the water looks realistic. Right along here, let's just give this a quick render. Right along here, the water obviously is shallow because it's lighter, it's clearer. Alright, now this is just a quick piece of geometry, so it doesn't look that great. I'll show you how to make some better geometry in a moment. Alright, so we've gone ahead and created a nice little basic water with a mountain, and covered a little bit about the water. Now let's go ahead and adjust the mountain. This here is the terrain editor. The terrain editor in and of itself is an extremely powerful tool. Alright, there are thousands upon millions of options, literally. There's nothing that you can't do with their terrain editor. Some things take a little bit longer, and that's why I personally like to work alongside with a program called World Machine. The two companies have created pieces of software that together make View the most powerful piece of software for terrain design in existence, except for maybe some proprietary software that has been created by companies but that doesn't actually get released to the public. But for accessible software, stuff that you and I can buy, this is the most powerful piece of software when combined with World Machine. So World Machine is available on the net. I do believe it's $1.99 or $2.99 now. When I bought it, it was a little bit more pricey. World Machine is a wonderful little piece of software. I'm not going to work with World Machine today, but I will have an entire tutorial series working with World Machine and View, showing you how to make different scenes and different pieces of geometry with World Machine and how to integrate that into View to make absolutely stunning scenery. Today I'm just going to show you something very quick. I brought the geometry. This here in the material or in the terrain editor will allow you to adjust the size of your geometry. And when I say size, I don't mean the physical width, length, and height of your geometry. I'm actually talking about the pixels, or the amount of polygons that that geometry contains. Now, if I were to create a mountain right now and select OK, you'll see I have 32,000 polygons. If I double-click on my geometry, which will bring up the terrain editor, same as if you right-click and go Edit Object, or double-click right here, then I can increase the size of that geometry. But if I select OK right now, that geometry goes up, but the quality of that geometry isn't going to change. So let me give you an example. Alright, you see how it's smooth? And if I increase that, it still pretty much looks the same. And this, of course, is going for just a generated terrain, not something that you actually manually create. But if I were to now that I have it at 1024, select this mountain tool, it will use the shape that I had before and create a mountain within that shape and make some modifications, giving it much more detail and many more edges. And you'll notice now, in the preview, that looks much more like a mountain. And this is just on basic preview settings. If I go into the render options, I can actually go up to final preview, and I do believe I can do that really quickly. Right, much more detail. Right, so that's good. That's a good start. Now the terrain editor is equipped with a brush editor. It's equipped with effects that you can make changes to the terrain itself. Different effects such as diffusion, glaciation, dissolving, fluvial effects, river valley, and of course you see that little square. If you right click, you can make changes to the functions in each of these, the diffusive iterations, and the grit, the iterations, and the peak iterations. All of these allow you to adjust iterations. I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of them, I don't remember which one. Anyways, and so over into And here you can paint materials if you select that paint option. And what that means is when I'm using my brush and digging, it'll also paint at the same time. Right. Now another thing I want to draw your attention to is the undos within each of the editors. This undo is independent of the undo of your scene. So when you make changes in your terrain editor, these undo buttons are independent of the undo buttons in your scene. So you'll be undoing changes to your terrain, not to your scene. I'm not going to get into detail into all of the different buttons and features in here, but there are lots of different little settings that you can adjust and work on. In my terrain editor tutorial series, we'll get into very great detail on what each of these different sections within the terrain editor can do. The next thing I want to focus on, actually let's keep that piece of geometry. The next thing I want to focus on is our atmosphere editor. One of my favorite editors. In fact, it is my favorite editor within View. So we're going to come in here, and the first thing I want to do is I want to show you the different tabs in the atmosphere editor. The first tab is your sun, second is your light, third is cloud, sky, fog, and haze, wind, and effects. Now you're not going to worry about wind right now. Wind is once you start dealing with animation. The first tab is your sun, and that is literally going to give you features that affect the realism, location, and coloration to some degree of your sun. I'm going to put my sun on the front of my scene. Just adjust these settings until the sun appears right about there. Yeah, let's put it right there. And then let's select this and just drag it over here. And you know what, let's even go ahead and increase the size. And put this further away. Alright. So far we've got a sunset. And it looks very much like a sunset, but it's not quite what we're looking for. So you can adjust the size of the actual sun. Before I'm going to do that, I'm just going to go here and drop down the glow completely. What that's going to do is take the glow away from the sun. That's in the sky, fog, and haze tab. You'll find glow intensity. We'll go back to the sun. We're going to drop down the corona right down to about 2%. And that's literally going to change the size of the sun. And just because it says that it's a sun doesn't mean you have to use it as a sun. If you're going to do a night scene, you can use the sun as the moon. You'll do that by adjusting, of course, the color of the sun. And your decay color and your sky color. I'm not going to get into how to make a night scene tonight. It's a little bit more complex than a basic scene. So let's go ahead and increase the sun size. Let's make the sun about, yeah, that's good. Let's make it look like it's actually setting. Right about there should be good. And you'll notice again, like I've said before, the way View is designed, it's designed to make things appear as they would in nature. And so the way they've set up the sky, fog, and haze, they've set it up so that your horizon looks just like a real horizon would and behaves like a real horizon would. And you can, of course, make changes to the decay on your sky and your fog and your haze to make your sky and your atmosphere and your horizon mimic different types of horizons or different types of atmospheres that you would see in real life, in real life situations. Now I'm going to select volumetric sunlight. I'm going to set that to 0. I'm not going to make too many changes today. I am going to increase that back up. Let's go to maybe 5%. going to actually boost up the sunlight all the way up and from the sky, my ambient light from the sky. We're going to darken down the scene. And I mean, already we have an absolutely stunning scene. I think let's do one more little thing here. Back to the terrain editor. I'm going to turn off that material editor. And you'll notice this little guy here. It shows entire scene. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to see where the sun is and allows you to see where your camera is. You'll see that your perspective camera is coming from there, which means that this here, and the sun is pointing this way from over here. This here is right here that you're seeing right here. And what I want to do is I want to just click on altitude, increase my brush size. Oops. Oops. If you ever get that little paintbrush coming up, or that little tool coming up, just hit escape, it'll go away. Let's just drop the flow and turn on the airbrush, and let's increase the size drastically. And I'm just coming in here using altitude to lower the edge of this scene down a bit. That's good enough. And of course, if you want to switch back to the previous view, you can just select the entire scene option again. Alright, and that gives us a little bit of a lower down area on my mountain that I've created there. I'm going to pull that mountain out a little bit. And now I'm going to put a tree in. Up here to the lovely little ecosystem painting tool, you can click here to add a plant, and we're going to just add a red maple. So let's select that red maple. And the reason why I'm selecting the red maple is because I like the look of the red maple. There's no other real reason. It is a high poly model, and we're just going to use a single instance. I am going to create, increase the size to probably 8. And I want to draw your attention in the ecosystem painter to a very important button, and that's this guy right here. It's restrict to selected objects. And what that's going to do is make sure that you're only painting on the object you've selected. And of course, like I've said before, the undo is independent. So in this editor, the undo is independent to the ecosystem painter only. This, of course, will give you the ability to hide the selected from view. I do actually believe it hides the entire ecosystem. I don't remember right now. And then, of course, if you have an ecosystem painted, you can click this guy and it'll clear everything out of the ecosystem. You can use the eraser or the brush. The brush will allow you to paint in quantity. And if you're noticing that it's not painting a lot, that's because, whoops, that's because you've got limit density here. So I'm going to limit that density, turn that off, and then I'm painting on the scene. And if you'll notice, if I do a quick view, just like that, and we've got what looks like a mountain covered in plants. It's quite beautiful, actually. And limiting density is very good, especially when you don't need in an area where you need sparse population of trees or plants, or if you are working with something where you don't want resources to be used excessively. There's also ecosystem population rules, and that'll bring up, of course, your global ecosystem material, and let you come into things like your general size of your red maple tree. When you have more trees, you'll be able to adjust the individual scale. Right? See, this overall scale is for the entire group. This will actually allow you to adjust the scale. Density is adjusted here, right? You got options like avoid overlapping instances. You got scaling here. You can avoid scaling. I'm not going to get into much detail with that, but variable scaling is a great little tool as well. Allows your when you paint multiple sizes, large, medium, small. So those are some features. We'll get into that again when I do my tutorial series on the ecosystem painter. Alright, so that basically covers that. I'm just going to place one tree, and I'm actually going to make it 15. You'll notice that when the slider is slid all the way to the end, it's not actually limited to that size in most situations. In some situations it is limited. But in most situations you can actually adjust the size, make it 15 or make it 20. I'm just going to go ahead and place the tree. And just like that. And before I continue with that, I'm just going to make one more modification. I'm going to increase my glow up to about 8%. And increase the corona. Notice that the top of my sun got a little brighter. And just boost its height just a little bit. Oops. Yeah, we'll go back to that. I have one more editor I'm going to show you today. I just want to make some more adjustments to my scene. And hopefully you're watching here because this is useful information. Let's decrease the sun size to about 4. And I'm actually going to drop that corona down again. Alright, so we've done quite a bit there. That should work. And the final thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add lens flares to all lights. Actually, just to the directional lights is only necessary. And I'm going to add ice rings. When I add ice rings, you'll see around the edges here you'll have ice rings. And drop the intensity. And just drop the size. Ice rings don't need to be that thick. Actually, they can be. It's going to be for your sun dogs. Yeah, that's good. Let's just still drop the intensity. It's good. Now I'm going to create a lens flare on the directional light. And that's going to open up another editor, and it's called the Lens Flare Editor. And the Lens Flare Editor allows you to make changes to your lens flare, which really add realism to your scene. And we're going to actually go ahead and remove... I'm going to put a blue anamorphic streak, just because I really like anamorphism. We'll leave that at 1. We're going to decrease the intensity of the flare. And we're going to actually turn down the intensity of the reflections. And turn up the sharpness. And the amount on the random streaks. And just a minor intensity. Actually, you know what? Forget the random streaks. So I've just made some minor changes, and you can go ahead and play around with everything in here. Different options will do different things, obviously. I'm just gonna give a little more intensity to my flare, and we will be good. And actually, one more thing I'll show you today. And that's going to be stars. We're not going to put lens flares. We will put some twinkles. I think I'm going to have to put the brightness rate up. You might not even see them because it is so bright. stars actually, we're not going to actually work with stars right now. They work better at nighttime. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually put a moon in. Remember this little planet button here? That gives you the ability to create a moon, and the moon has, again, its own little aspect attributes, where you can make modifications to the phase of the moon and its size. And I'm actually going to put the moon right here. Now, you'll rarely ever see the moon and the sun this close to each other, but I don't know, I like it. And of course, you can change the planet to whatever you'd like it to be. I'm actually going to change it to Earth. I'm going to change its size too. Make it a bit smaller. Or below the horizon there. And there we go. Let's just put that there. There. It looks like we have a planet, a second planet just outside of our atmosphere, which is kind of cool. Alright, so that's just a quick little scene. I'm going to go ahead and give that a quick render. And so basically today we've covered your menu bar, your toolbars, your overview, your preview. You do have one more thing in the preview. You do have the ability to right click and adjust the quality settings in the preview, which is a good little feature as well. We covered several different editors, including the material editor, the atmosphere editor, the paint ecosystem, the lens flare editor, the water editors, and one more quick thing we're going to cover, and then we'll call it a day, is an editor we're not going to get into in this tutorial series, but I will still show you, and that's called the function editor. If I right click on almost anything in View, you'll notice the ability, not anything, but most anything, to edit function, and that will bring up this beautiful little guy called the function editor. The function editor is really where View's power is hidden. It's where every single thing in View that you want to be able to modify or change can be modified or changed. This is where you're going to learn to work with the wave sizes of your ocean, everything from advanced material features, making your materials look, say for example, if you're going to make granite, making your materials look very much like granite, to caustics, working with underwater caustics and colors and underwater reflections, and making things look much more realistic. Every single feature in View ties into the function editor, and so function editor is an extremely important feature in View, and that we will have an entire tutorial series, probably two, covering the function editor, where I will teach everything I possibly can about the function editor. So this covers today's tutorial. Thank you for watching, and in our next tutorial we're going to make a scene where a mountain is protruding through the clouds, and we're going to show you how to make very realistic clouds and the sun dancing off the clouds and some shadows. Alright, so thank you for tuning in and have a great day.